Hey everyone, welcome back to Dev Parkour. In this video, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to tell a story of kind of an early episode in my career that I call the Nanaimo Story. I remember my grandfather telling stories about his childhood and his early career and that sort of thing, and I really appreciated just hearing all those things. It's kind of cool to see. To hear about, previous generations, in whatever form that may take, and the challenges they went through and the lessons that they learned. So hopefully you'll find this maybe not quite as interesting, but maybe as interesting as I found the stories that my grandfather would tell me. So without further ado, this is the Nanaimo Story. And it's called the Nanaimo Story because most of it takes place in a town called Nanaimo, and Nanaimo is right there. So it's in BC, Canada. So there's Seattle down here. This is Washington. This is Vancouver Island, and Nanaimo is right there on that side of Vancouver Island. It's basically the last town on that body of water, which is called Georgia Strait. Before it opens up into basically nothing. Beyond that, it's little small towns, lots of trees, really beautiful area of the world. I was going to say the country, but it's actually in Canada. But really beautiful area, really great place to be, but it is pretty much the middle of nowhere. There's definitely, at least when I was there, there's definitely no cell reception, which will actually play into this story a little bit. But up until that point, there are various towns along the coast. Obviously, Vancouver. If you remember back to the map, Vancouver is on the opposite side of that strait. Vancouver is a very large city, but again, Vancouver is pretty much the last area of significant civilization, a significant town, city, going north up the Strait of Georgia. So to set the stage, this was the summer of 2010, I believe. I just started my company, Synapse Software, for the first time, and I started it with a friend and colleague that I met at UCCS here. We were partners. We were working together, and as our very first endeavor, we decided that we wanted to build iPhone apps. The iPhone was relatively new at the time. It had been out for, I think, 3 years at the time. So there were certainly app developers out there, but it wasn't as widely, it wasn't as big an industry as it is today. So we were going to try our hand at iPhone apps. We'd never done this before. We never worked in iOS. We never used Xcode, I don't think, even. So we didn't want to try to land a client right away and have the fate of our company like succeed or fail based on okay, we're getting paid to do X, and can we actually pull it off? So we approached the owner of a bar that we went to fairly regularly, and told him, hey, we just started a company. We're going to try mobile app development, specifically iOS app development. Would you mind if we built you an iPhone app just on our, this is our kind of test application. We want to see if we can do it. And I forget exactly what the terms were. I don't remember if he wasn't on the hook for any payment until we actually delivered something or something along those lines. We may have actually done it for free, which if we did that, warning, my recommendation is don't do that. Don't do something for other people for free. Do something for yourself for free. That's totally fine. But don't necessarily do something for other people for free, even if you're not sure your ability to pull it off. In hindsight, we probably should have struck some deal where it was, if this works out, then we can talk about, how much it's worth to you And if we can't come to an agreement, it goes nowhere. If we do come to an agreement, then it goes into the App Store. Anyway, that's not the point of the story. What we ended up building was kind of a server client app. So the mobile app talked to a server, basically a web server. At this point, REST was the way to go. So it was essentially a REST server, and we needed a place to host that. Both of us had sysadmin backgrounds, so we were really good at maintaining on-premises servers. I had a few extra machines. I stood one up in my apartment. You can probably see where this is headed. So we set up this server in my apartment, got all the DNS figured out, everything was working. Then I go on this trip. I go to, it wasn't to Nanaimo, it was actually a boat trip that took me from the Pacific Northwest through Nanaimo, up beyond, into the middle of nowhere. And then we came back down kind of the other side, past Vancouver, hung out in Point Roberts for a bit, which is another area up there. It's part of the U.S., but you can't actually get to it from the rest of Washington. You have to go through, not Vancouver, you have to go through British Columbia to get to it. But yeah, I went on this trip, and this was several weeks. This was a multi-week trip, 2 or 3 weeks. What ended up happening was, for one reason or another, the server in my apartment dropped offline. I forget if there was an internet outage, Comcast cut out, or if the server went down for one reason or another. I don't remember exactly what the details were. But this was, thankfully the app wasn't live yet. If it was live, that would have been far worse, but we were still in development, and that meant that my business partner couldn't actually continue to do work. Our software development processes weren't nearly as rigorous as I tend to use now. I didn't have GitLab set up. I think we may have been developing on the server. So when this server went down, work could not continue. So I realized the importance of this. I told him, go pick the lock on my apartment, go break into my apartment, essentially. Get whatever you need, take the machine, take the hard drive out of the machine, whatever you need to do in order to, continue working. In a couple days, I'll be in Nanaimo. I think I was in the islands at that point, so I had cell reception. I could talk to him, I could text him. That part was fine, but I couldn't actually do anything about the computer. But I said I'd be in a city, in a couple days. I will set up a virtual private server in the cloud so that we don't have to worry about this connectivity issue anymore. All I'll do, because all I'll have time to do, is create a user account for me, a user account for you, him, and basically hand over the keys to him, and he could configure it to do whatever he needed it to do. Essentially, that all went swimmingly. But this was a couple day gap. So in the meantime, he tried to pick the lock on my apartment. Apparently, this apartment, though it wasn't the nicest apartment in the world, but apparently the locks were some of the harder ones to pick and break into. So he actually had to get the help of another one of our friends who was really good at picking locks to actually get in. Eventually they get in, they get the computer, they lock the door behind them. All of that works just fine. And then when I get to Nanaimo, I do what I said I was going to do. I set up the VPS, I create user accounts, I hand the keys over to him. When everything is done, I look around and realize that I'm sitting in the children's section. In my, urgency, in my panic, I'd gone into the library, looked around, looked for the first table I could spot, and sat down at it, not really paying attention to where the books, what books were around me. And turns out that it was the children's section. So I'm sure I got a few weird looks, like, why is this adult sitting in the children's section with a laptop open, doing work? What's going on here? So ultimately got the VPS set up, and everything went along fine. And that particular VPS I don't think exists anymore, but I am still using that service. That was Linode. That was thankfully I'd previously gotten a recommendation of hey, you should use Linode if you're looking for a VPS service. This was either before AWS or in the early days of AWS, so that wasn't really on my radar. But Linode has worked well. It worked well then. It continues to work well for me. But yeah, so moral of the story there is, if you're going to run a web server, make sure it's running on something that's designed to stay connected to the internet for, you know, extended amounts of time. You know, ideally, you know, that includes the machine itself. You know, any virtual machines or anything, and all of the network connectivity, right? So, you know, you don't want to be necessarily trusting of Comcast to stay connected 100% of the time, or even, you know, any number of 9% of the time. Whereas a true hosting VPS, you know, platform as a service provider, infrastructure as a service provider, you could trust that they're going to be up and running a good amount of time. So today, you know, Linode is still great, and you can actually, I think in the description there's an affiliate link for Linode if you want to sign up for them. There's definitely one for DigitalOcean, which is a similar sort of thing. All of those providers, even if they started just with virtual private servers, they've all expanded their offerings to include several other things. You know, they're not quite as full featured as Azure and AWS, but they definitely have plenty of offerings. So today, I wouldn't necessarily not recommend Linode, but there are certainly other options. So Linode, DigitalOcean. If you wanted, you know, more of you know, the AWS side of things, you've got AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform. If you're an enterprise, you can look at the IBM Cloud. I forget what theirs is called. It might just be IBM Cloud, or Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, OCI. Never used either of those two, but I have used Google Cloud Platform, Azure, and AWS. So yeah, moral of the story, don't run a server that you intend to be externally accessible from your apartment or house, unless you're also willing to invest in the network infrastructure and, you know, the additional high availability stuff that's necessary to keep that all running, that all of these other providers, you know, just give you as part of the whole package. So I hope you found this story interesting. If you lasted all the way through to the end of the video, thank you very much for indulging me. That story is really an important part for me in my career. So hopefully you got something out of it. Check out the other videos that I have about security. I'm doing a lot of stuff on security. I'll leave links in the video description about those. Be sure to subscribe, click that notification bell, like this video if you like my story. If you want me to do more stories like this, go ahead and leave a comment, and I'll see what I can do. I'll pick some other aspects of my career, or possibly even, you know, my childhood, my, you know, upbringing, that sort of thing. But yeah, and if you have any questions about things that I mentioned in the story, or anything really, go ahead and leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to answer all of your questions. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.